This interlude brought to you by Waffles. Waffles reminding you pancakes suck.
Y'all don't have Waffle Houses in Massachusetts, do you?
No, we don't have Waffle House, unfortunately.
Man, y'all miss out because I got an email on Friday that because this is my birthday month, I get a free waffle at Waffle House.
Nice. You work for Waffles?
Yeah. I will work for Waffles, yes. You know I will.
Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Wilder Ride, Getting Wilder by the Minute, a podcast where we break down and celebrate the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. We are looking at the film Young Frankenstein. I am your host, Alan Sanders.
And I'm your co-host, Walt Murray, who has now hit his mark 5 days in a row.
You have hit it every single episode this week.
This is a first.
I have not had to call you out. After this, it is all downhill.
Oh, it's the wings are coming off.
But it is Friday. We are capping out the end of the week, and we appreciate everybody being back and appreciate once again returning as our guest, Sean German. Welcome back, Sean.
Thank you so much for having me back.
We love having you here, and your experience and your wisdom and guidance in podcasting, we appreciate it.
That's scary.
I have to write the check to the suck-up minute of the podcast, and there we go. All right, let's get to it. When last we left, Doctor Frankenstein and Inga had made their way into another chamber, another room with a lot of bottles and laboratory equipment, and suddenly a row of heads on a shelf, each one in various states of decay, starting going backwards 3 years, 2 years, and then 6 months. We come to yet another jump scare that is both a jump scare and hysterical all at the same time.
Yeah. When they pan in, and I remember this like it was yesterday when I saw this in the theater. I about jumped out of my skin, and then I about fell on the floor laughing because you've got Igor with his head in the box.
Underneath the tag that says freshly dead.
Freshly dead.
His eyes are as wide, the bug-eyed look that, of course, through his disease that he had. He said, you know what? I could sit back as an actor and complain about the fact that I've lost sort of the leading man looks, or I could capitalize on this, to which he chose the latter and became just a comedic genius. But his expression, it looks like, oh my God, he's dead.
Yeah, and then he starts into, I ain't got no body.
And he yells at you. He's like, I ain't got nobody. He's just not even he's not looking at the characters. He's not looking for their response. He's just staring straight out into space and singing this song.
Straight as he can.
Yeah, as straight as he can.
I have
and
to.
He's singing through this grin. You got to wonder how long has he been sitting there waiting for them to come down? Just like, oh, I've got this great idea. I'm gonna scare these guys. I'm gonna get a little number in.
Well, and this
kind of like, all right, how long is it going to take them? They got to figure out the bookcase. They got to get past the rat. They open the door. All right, I'm ready.
Their skulls. And this has to be one of those scenes that the crew was stuffing in their face with the handkerchiefs, because the crew had to be losing it too.
Mm.
There had to have been a number of takes on this one, because I know Marty Feldman, he did follow most of the lines, but every now and then he added. He was only supposed to just go, I ain't got nobody, and that's it. He wasn't supposed to do the whole he's the only guy I know who can do a tap dance with his face.
Yeah, great vaudeville routine. Yeah, with his face. That's
because he's doing that. He's just like I've actually practiced doing that just now. I wanted to make sure I could do it for this minute, because the first time I did it, I was like, how does he do it that fast? I had to practice.
No, you can't just do that.
No, you can't.
That is a skill.
No. Yeah, kids, don't try this at home. He's a professional.
Well, I don't want to go too far. Yeah. What's hysterical, obviously, it's the gag, it's the joke.
Yeah.
We get the jump scare and the humor all at the same time. But what I love is the dynamic, once again, between these two actors, knowing how to use the stare, the pause, the shift of facial expression, because just after he does the whole and he's like, yay, give me my applause, the very second he finishes, Gene Wilder, Dr. Frankenstein, goes, Igor! And he shifts and goes, Froderick.
Froderick.
Which goes back to all the way to the Transylvania station.
Yep, when they first
where
met.
he questions him about, you're pulling my leg. You're putting me on when he says, your name is Frankenstein? It's like, was it Froderick? It's like, no. Well, why is it not? So,
and now it's like, you're Froderick.
So forever now, you know what? Fine. You want to change your last name? I've changed your first name. Ha. And we mentioned Igor seems to always be technically in charge. He's always pulling the doctor's leg.
Yep. And he doesn't even address him as Dr. Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein. It's Froderick.
Froderick.
The name that I have given you, that's what I'm going to call you by.
So, and Sean, remember we talked about this earlier this week. This gag about his name, Froderick, was set up way back, at least 15 minutes ago in the movie. Mm-hmm. And here it is coming back. And if you weren't paying attention to him having that conversation on the station, you have no idea why he says Froderick here.
Right. Yeah, the movie keeps you on your toes. You have to be paying attention and maybe even taking notes.
Dang it. It's almost like you need to do this 1 minute at a time.
Absolutely. Somebody needs to do that.
I wish they would.
Sorry, Sean, we beat you to it.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to have to insert the next time we swear. I'm going to use So actually, as soon as this little gag comes around and he's like, where did you come from? I love Marty Feldman has no idea what personal space is.
I was about to say the same thing. He's like, I'm getting right nose to nose, so I can't see you. So and I'm going to say my next line.
See, and Sean, I don't know if you know this joke. The reason why we say that, Mel Brooks used to say this all the time in front of Marty Feldman. He said, the only way you can ever hide from him is go nose to nose, because then he loses you and his eyes going either way. And so he's like way up into Gene Wilder's face when he delivers the line about coming down in the dumbwaiter.
Well, I love the contrast, because one of the great things about this movie, and I think something that all great comedy has in common, at least to be a great comedic film, that it has to be in the writing and the setup in the film itself, that the actors here, they're playing it straight. Froderick, he's a scientist. Inga is his assistant. They're acting like they're in a monster movie. They're not acting like a comedy. And I think that's true of most of the people, that the comedy comes out of the situation, not the way the actors are portraying it, except for Igor here, except for Marty Feldman. He's in a comedy. Everyone else is in a monster movie, but he's in a comedy, and he's laughing it up. He's in, I don't know if it's a Marx Brothers film, it's some kind of slapstick. He's just from outer space. He's like coming in from a different movie with just a different aesthetic, like the way he's acting, the way he's delivering his lines. I mean, following it up with this, call it a hunch, which is, it's simultaneous. It's like, it's a paradox. It's weird. It's like, it's the same time, like the most intelligent humor, while simultaneously being the lowest common denominator for the hunchback to make that joke.
Yeah, and this is one of those moments with, Marty Feldman able to do that, give us the slapstick, the high comedy, and even the visual comedy of where his eyes are looking and how he's sort of bringing us into the gag. He hits all layers, and he hits them, every one of them at, the pedal to the metal. Everyone is full on.
And even his timing here is funny, because he's got his head in the box, and then he takes the time after the question to step around to the front of the box and go nose to nose with Gene Wilder before he delivers his next line. Really just absolutely hysterical. And it gives you a second to catch your breath after that kind of shock, the vaudeville show that he puts on, and then his step around to answer the question.
Well, what I like is now we've established, Sean, you had mentioned before in earlier this week, what's the architecture like in this house? Because we've got one secret way to get down into the dungeon, apparently, or in the it's a secret laboratory.
Yes.
Obviously, we've now discovered another one. There's a dumbwaiter. When Victor was working on his Frankenstein monster, he needed to call up and down something from the kitchen.
Which makes sense, because it is, I imagine you build up quite an appetite trying to reanimate the dead. It's hungry work.
I get this way with any project. I get so heads down, I sometimes forget to eat. It's nice to have somebody bring me some food down, and waiter open, ding, here you go, lunch. And like, oh, I didn't think about it.
Well, one thing I kind of wondered about that whole explanation there, I assumed earlier on that Igor grew up in the castle because, his grandfather worked for Dr. Frankenstein. It seems like he's always kind of lurking around in the place. If he grew up there, I would have thought that he would have found this, because kids
Wouldn't you know the main way into the laboratory?
Yeah. And I would have thought would have kind of found this passageway or ridden in the dumbwaiter before, which is funny just thinking of him riding in the dumbwaiter.
Well, maybe that's the only way he knows to come down here, because as a kid, you would probably play in the dumbwaiter. Most kids would.
I would think so. So I would have thought that he would have, found this before, but I guess it's not really that important.
Well, he doesn't act like he doesn't act like he doesn't know about the laboratory.
That's true.
Just that he heard a weird sound and decided, I'm going to take the dumbwaiter down into the secret laboratory.
Good point. I guess it isn't that he's never been down there before, but
certainly no one's been down here recently based in the state that it's in. But he knew, hey, something's coming from down inside the castle. I'll just ride the dumbwaiter.
Something's going on downstairs.
Well, then there's the wonderful gag here where, he's talking about how did he know it was down here? He's like, call it a hunch. Looking over his shoulder at his own hump, almost staring at us through the camera as if breaking the fourth wall. Uh-huh. And then, just in case we didn't get what he meant, he points.
He points it.
Yeah.
Get it, everybody?
And there's going to be somebody who doesn't still get the joke because, but it's a hump. It's not a hunch. Yeah. These are our fellow trailer park friends down here in Georgia that go outside when the tornado shows up, and they're always the ones that get in the news.
Yes, they are.
They're the ones who couldn't remember where their shirt is. They still have the mullet, and they go, "I heard it sound like a train. It came right around the trailer park, picked it right on up, and ain't found Grandma yet."
Why is he pointing to his hump?
I don't get. It's a hump, not a hunch. This guy can't speak right.
And then Inga looks completely dumbfounded.
Yeah.
She has no idea what's going on.
Do we need to explain why he calls it a hunch, just in case?
Why don't you go ahead for our simpler listeners?
Well, maybe because he plays for the Fighting Irish. Do you think people get that one?
Probably. Well, some.
Maybe he wants to be Rudy one day.
Yes.
There you go. Well, yeah, because he's not a humpback. He's not a whale.
No, exactly.
No, that's true.
He's a hunchback.
Hunch.
Yeah. Like the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
That's right.
Notre Dame?
Notre Dame. Notre Dame.
So anyway, that's the joke here. He takes it to almost like too far, but you know what? It works. It works so well for Marty Feldman because even pointing it out, and he's got that grin. Once again, almost like he's grinning to the audience he knows is out there watching us. He's not looking at us at this point, but it's that grin that he knows he's performing. He's performing for someone.
Well, and one good point that you make here is that they never really overdo a joke or belabor a joke too long. They really move from joke to joke or, joke to jump scare, and he points it out and then they move on. And they don't let that joke just sit there and get stale. So I don't know if that's in editing or writing or whatever.
We had somebody talk about this that said, I think actually it was Adam who said, or maybe it was Jonathan. Either one of them had said at some point, they didn't mind at this time in filmmaking in 1974 to let things play out slowly, let the audience today's hyper editing, constantly give me eye candy, keep me entertained. Something like this may not have worked, and they would have had to tell the joke 5, 6, 7, 8 times, one on top of the other. Just let's keep them laughing.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, no, tell the joke, move along, because the rewatchability is as funny every single time instead of getting old. Because if you look at movies like, I liked Spaceballs by Mel Brooks when it first came out. But on rewatching, it has not aged well at all. Some of the jokes were too timely that if you didn't grow up in the 80s, you don't really get as many of the jokes. They didn't work as well. I don't think Spaceballs is nearly as funny as Young Frankenstein.
No, I'd agree. And I watched Spaceballs not too long ago, and I had a hard time sitting through it. Some of the jokes still, I laugh out loud because at heart I'm a 10-year-old, but it is not as strong a movie as it used to be. As much as it pains me to say that, I don't like Spaceballs as much as I used to.
Sean, what about you?
Yeah, I don't think you'd get too much argument on that to go out on a limb and say that Spaceballs is not as funny as Young Frankenstein, or at least I'm not going to argue that point. And I think, I agree. It hasn't aged as well. I don't think it will age as well when it's as old as Young Frankenstein is now. And I think part of that is it's not as good a sci-fi movie or space opera or whatever it's trying, whatever it's trying to parody. Parody needs to be good at what it's parodying. Spaceballs is certainly not good a sci-fi movie as Young Frankenstein is a monster movie. And I'll also mention something like Al Yankovic, Weird Al, who does parody songs, but he's great. His band is one of the best bands, the musicians that perform with Weird Al, and he's got a regular group that he's worked with pretty much his entire career and they do the range of styles that he covers, the different songs that he uses for his parodies, and they only age well because they are good. They're good songs. There's good musicianship. There's good performance. And then he happens to have these funny lyrics. And I would say the same. I have experience with that with Spinal Tap. Again, it doesn't work as well if they're not a good band. If the actors that are in that, Christopher Guest, Harry Shearer, Michael McKean, who played all their own, wrote those songs, played their instruments. When you watch the movie or if you get the soundtrack, the actors are actually the band. If it's not good music, it can still be funny, but it's not as good as a parody, and it's not going to age as well. So bring it back to movies. Yeah, I'd agree. Mel Brooks is great. Mel Brooks has done a lot of great work without Gene Wilder, but when you look at his movies, you look at the parodies, this being, Young Frankenstein, a parody of monster movies, and Blazing Saddles of Westerns, and then, Robin Hood and, the Men in Tights. Yeah. And his kind of parody of the Sword and Sandals period pieces that he did in History of the World. Mel Brooks is just not as good without Gene Wilder. I think the three best Mel Brooks movies are Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, and The Producers. I don't think there's much of an argument to be. You could how you want to rank those 1, 2, and 3. We can discuss and debate all day. But if you want to tell me that there's a better movie that Mel Brooks made that doesn't have the involvement of Gene Wilder, I think you're going to have a tough time making that case. It's those two working together that produces this magic.
I think you've got an interesting point there. And even though I still think he made some very good and funny movies, especially as he got into the 80s and then the 90s, there was something, the sheen wasn't quite as bright on the projects. They kind of started to they were almost becoming parodies of themselves rather than the material they were trying to parody.
Yeah. And I think, too, one place that I would agree with you, and then one place that I could say is an exception to your rule, the Naked Gun movies are awesome parodies, but they could fit a little bit tighter into that police, the kind of the police genre of movies. But the Airplane movies, particularly the first one, is genius comedy, but it would have been a terrible airport movie because it doesn't have those elements to it. But it is a tight comedy with a lot of great elements to it. But I think that you're right that this is such a good monster movie on its own. The comedy elements are so strong that it makes it a great comedy.
Well, let's shift gears for just a brief second before we continue on, because in this same scene where we're seeing Igor point to his hump and said he had a hunch, did you realize that there's a logo for Frankenstein, for Mr. Frederick Frankenstein on his robe?
I did not.
He has
the monogram.
He's got a double F monogram, but it's got a little swoop to it. Look at that. He's got his own brand.
It's kind of the Van Halen logo look.
Yeah, and that's been there with us all week. I think this is the best look about 30 seconds in. It's probably the best look we get of it. Yeah, he's got his version of TB12, I guess, for Frederick there, his FF.
Yeah, obviously, it says something about being a doctor and about his wealth that his robes and his clothes have been monogrammed.
Yeah, and it is a good look for him and for that character that it is kind of the smoking jacket evening wear that he's brought out. So.
Okay. It's his robe. Remember he asked for it.
It's his robe. Right. Yes. That's right.
It's not a smoking jacket.
I'm sorry.
Hey, Walt, this is Young Frankenstein. You want to watch the minute before we go on?
Wait, what? I thought we were doing Airplane.
You did go to Airplane Love for a minute there.
I did. It was such a great movie.
All right. Well, as we continue, they get back now, which they do, again, perfectly. The pendulum swings, and it feels natural. We've gone from the horror jump scare to the comedy and the bit about the hump, and then all of a sudden we're right back swinging the other way. Well, I still hear it, and there's only one door, and it's coming from there. And so we're right back to the mystery. Where is the violin music coming from?
And Frederick is really drawn to that music.
He is. Now, there's a great gag here, and Sean, I know you mentioned it earlier this week, a tie-in. Other movies have done this, but one almost mirrors it word for word. Igor talks about how it could be dangerous. You go first.
Yes, yeah. So I when I was talking earlier this week, I said another tie-in with Indiana Jones, and obviously this gets a little, I guess, borrowed or a little shout out, whatever, from Spielberg in Raiders of the Lost Ark when Indiana and Sala are looking down into the Well of Souls, and it's full of snakes, and they can see, and Sala says, "Asps, very dangerous. You go first."
You go
and
first.
Obviously they're paying homage, I'm sure, to the wonderful Igor here in this scene. And it's great. One of the things about comedy is I think conflict is very, very important, and contrast very important in comedy, that there has to be, some kind of conflict, something to set up just between setup or the premise and the punchline, or something unexpected has to happen. And yeah, it kind of sets it up like Igor is going to be the hero, that he's warning his companions, say, "Oh, this is dangerous. Let me go first." But then he flips it. It's, "No, you go first."
What I also like about how the joke immediately gets inserted, but we're going to move on, as Igor says it, his eyes dart back and forth, and he swoops around to behind Inga, and as they leave the scene, he's actually looking behind him to make sure nobody's sneaking up behind him. I mean, this is his castle. This is where his grandfather worked with Victor Frankenstein. He makes a point early on on the Transylvania station saying how the rates have gone up now that he's
That's right.
the new henchman. He's darting around and looking like, is anybody behind us? Which is kind of cool that he's creeped out by the same castle.
He is. And,
Yeah.
and this is obviously something that has never happened before with the music playing. And
That's true. This music is new because there would have been no reason, because we'll find out later, but there would have been no reason for anybody to play this particular tune until the visit of Dr. Frankenstein.
That's right. Or
Frankenstein.
to play it from the room down here.
Now, one of the things I think it is funny, we've had so many weird and fun wipes as we move from scene to scene up to this minute. We've had the diagonal wipe, the straight up and down wipe. We've had the diamond wipe. We've had the pinhole, sort of the cartoon go down and come back. This was one of the first times where we actually do a true, it's a cut to black, and we cut immediately into the room. It's a black screen, and the door opens, and we realize the camera's just jumped into the room as we move further on their quest to find where the sound is coming from. It's a pretty cool effect because it moved us from a sideways look to them coming right at the camera.
Yeah, with the only illumination being the candle.
Right. And I presume you were talking about a little earlier on Igor kind of growing up in this castle and knowing about the dumbwaiter, knowing his way around. Though it seems at least this room that they're entering would be new to him. He doesn't seem familiar, and he points out that there's switches on the wall, but he doesn't do it in a way like, "Oh yeah, there's the light switch." He's exploring along with them at this point. So this is something new, again, even for someone who should be familiar with at least most of this castle.
Yeah, apparently, maybe he never was allowed to go down. Like, this is where Daddy works. You're not allowed to come past this doorway.
Mm-hmm.
Because he does, not only is he concerned, it looks kind of scary, this looks dangerous, you go first.
Yeah.
Which is a great funny line. But he does also, when we come into this room, he's hunched down and we see him poking down at the very bottom of the frame from behind Dr. Frankenstein. Like, okay, if something happens, at least I'm shielded by the good doctor.
He's such a creepy weirdo. I mean, he is so weird.
The whole time he moves around, I can't figure out if he's emulating a cat or a dog because he's always swooping his head from side to side.
Yeah, and he's so hyperactive and
Well, and the way they frame this and they shoot it, it's just like a disembodied head. Well, because he's in all black and he's got a hood or something, like his head is covered. It's just his face kind of floating, especially once the door closes behind them. There's just this disembodied head sort of floating in the darkness.
And it is interesting because as soon as, and we've mentioned this as well, why aren't there any light switches? We finally get Dr. Frankenstein to say, aren't there any lights in this place? Which, of course, sets up the next gag here, which is Igor saying, well, there's two nasty-looking switches over there, but I'm not touching them.
Again, it's all yours, Chief.
Yeah.
Go to it.
For a henchman, he doesn't like to do a whole lot of work.
He's not much of a henchman. He'll point stuff out, but
I mean, he didn't want to help lift the bags, you know?
No, he's happy to help with the bags.
Right.
The two women.
Later.
But no, he wasn't. Yeah, he's going to do kind of the absolute minimum here.
Yeah, we're getting the contrast. We were noting what a faithful assistant Inga was for the first few minutes this week, and we're getting a very stark contrast in Igor's work ethic there. I don't know what's in the henchman's handbook, but it's got to be more than this.
Well, and visually speaking, she's dressed in white, and she's there to help, and she is the helpful person. She's the caring person. She's the one to help to serve. And Igor, dressed in black, is the exact polar opposite.
Yeah, he ain't going to do crap.
Right.
He doesn't do anything. All he does, he either comes up with excuses, he drops the ball, or he tries to he puts the doctor in a precarious position. It's always, he's the screw up.
Yeah. You can go electrocute yourself. That's fine. I'll be right over here.
I just love the way he delivers the lines, too.
Oh.
Two nasty looking switches over there. But I'm not touching them.
Yeah.
You can't make me do it. You're my henchman. I don't care.
He is the perfect straight man, or whatever it is he is, the Google-eyed man to facilitate the humor here.
Well, as we begin to wrap this up, and we're at the very end of the week, we will not get to see if electricity is still running. And by the way, if electricity is still running, don't you think somebody would have at least gotten the electric bill? They would have at least known. But
I would think so.
In this case, we don't get to see what happens yet. We're going to have to come back Monday to see whether or not there is actual working lights in this part of the castle.
And folks, let me tell you, it's going to be worth it.
Well, sparks will fly.
Yes, they will.
Sean, you've made it an entire week with us, and somehow you enjoyed your time with us. At least I think you did. For those folks who want to know a little bit more about where they can find you day in and day out, not just visiting the Castle von Frankenstein from time to time, where can they find you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I enjoyed every minute of it, so to speak. And yeah, if folks would like to hear more of my my insights, I've got another podcast where I do the same thing. I watch a movie 1 minute at a time, although in our case, the movie is the 1993 classic Groundhog Day. And I call that podcast Groundhog Minute. And that's with my co-host Dave Powles, and you can find that in the iTunes and Google Play, and also on our website, groundhogminute.com. And then I've got a previous movie that I reviewed, also 1 minute at a time, and you can find that at spinaltapminute.com.
Fantastic. Walt, somebody who wants to continue to explore the grounds and the laboratory and areas inside of the castle, where can they come find us?
We would love for you to come find us over at www.thewilderride.com. From there, you can find us on Patreon and all the other many places around the internet where we are lurking.
And much like the Groundhog Minute and Spinal Tap Minute, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, all the typical places that you like to get your podcast either streamed to or downloaded, saved, played, wherever it is that you like to listen. We hope that you add us to your subscription list so that way you can continue to get these 1 minute at a time.
And if you'd like to do a little bit more to help us out here, you can always join us as a Wilder Rider at patreon.com/thewilderride. And you can find out some ways that you can be a part of the team here and help defray some of our costs.
Awesome. Well, next week when we come back, and everybody, we want you back here on Monday. It's getting kind of creepy. You know, we're looking around. We're seeing that there's some switches on the wall, but we are going to go from flipping the switch to seeing what a filthy mess befalls the Doctor and Inga and Igor as they look down below to the secret lab.
The lab of Dr. Franken.
Well, it would be Dr. Frankenstein here.
Stein, yes.
Dr. Frankenstein.
He is quickly becoming Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah, ooh. Oh, that's a good insight. Well, why did we wait till the last minute to say that?
Hey, I just thought of it.
Well, good thing we've got more minutes coming up.
Yes,
Sean,
absolutely.
Once again, thanks so much for joining us here on The Wilder Ride. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I love this movie, and I love the podcast.
Until Monday, where we will take a look at what a filthy mess.
Dr. Frankenstein.
It's not Frankenstone.
Frankenstein?
Frankenstein. Or Frankenstein.
Is that the Flintstones version of this movie? Frankenstein.
Yes. If we keep going back in time, we might find Barney Rubble down there.
Yeah. Along with Igor.